Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to one of our videos. I'm delighted today to be joined by Simon Rhind Tutt. Simon owns and runs Relationship Audits and Management. Hello, Simon. How are you?
I'm extremely well, Paul. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. It's a Friday afternoon now, so even better.
Indeed.
Simon, thank you for joining us today. You and I have known each other for a little while, but I wanted to have a chat with you really about several of the issues around our industry, but specifically the ones that you know an awful lot and probably more than most people about. But before we get into the weeds of that, perhaps we could maybe have some context and, if you could explain a little bit about your career, where you started and what you're doing today in relationship audits, I think that would be really good.
Thank you. And hello, everybody. In a nutshell, when I was at school, the two things that really interested me, apart from football and rugby, were drama and business studies. And it seemed to me that probably the best option for me in terms of a career that actually merged both drama and business studies was advertising. So I joined a large American advertising agency as an account manager, and I moved between an agency called Benton and Bowles, then I moved to Young and Rubicam, and then I ended up as the sales and marketing director at the worst named advertising agency in the world called Grey. That went very well. I was part of the team that doubled the size of the agency in 3 years. And I then moved on to an independent branding agency called Michael Peters, which was then the largest independent branding agency in the world, and headed up their new business. After about a couple of years, the strategic director and the deputy creative director and I got together and thought, let's do it for ourselves. And we set up an agency. It was called Wickenstadt Southgate. And there must be something about 3 years, Paul, because in 3 years we became a top 10 UK branding agency. I was latterly to actually sell that. And I started something originally called the Tutt Consultancy that specialised in advising agencies on how they should manage and market themselves. And in a sense, that morphed about 20 years ago with the help of one of my old colleagues from Y&R who joined me in the early days of the Tutt Consultancy. And we created Relationship Audits and Management to advise agencies and indeed clients on the quality of their business relationships.
Oh, I mean, there's some really big names and you've had a bit of a stellar career on the agency side in the creative industry. I mean, what is it about the creative industry that sort of really fires you up? I mean, you've been in it a long time and there must be something that makes you jump out of bed in the morning, really.
A couple of things. I suppose first and foremost, the people that work in the creative industry are some of the most creative, as you would imagine, ambitious and dynamic people. And that's what drives me that's what drove me originally to join the creative industry, as well as being associated with great ideas.
Cool. And have you seen much change from when you started in terms of the way that agencies work and to where we are today?
How long have you got, Paul?
Well, about 30 minutes.
There are two parts to this, and I think the first part is really important. Yes, a lot has changed, but there are some fundamental things that haven't changed and in my view won't change. Firstly, what I would call brilliant basics: on brief, on budget and on time. Secondly, clients' desire for strategic insights, to be the voice of the consumer in their business and in their communication. And that's become a lot more difficult because of the segmentation and changes that has gone on and is going on within the consumer society. And I think the desire for great ideas. I think one of the things that has changed is, and you've only got to look at ads, whether they're on social media or whether on the TV or radio or billboards, there are fewer great ideas. Now, I would take that as an opportunity personally, but it's more difficult, I accept, for agencies to sell big ideas.
Interesting.
So that's what hasn't changed in a sense. What has changed is many things. We reckon that there's been more change in the last 3 years than there has in the last 30. And everybody looking at this video will be able to reel off, COVID, financial crisis, Ukraine war, and so on. But I think what we're seeing is a highly complex marketing environment. We're seeing a huge increase in scopes of work with all the multi-channels that there are. Equally, we're seeing a huge fragmentation of agencies. It's not uncommon to find clients that are working with 20 different agencies of all different types and sizes. Actually, Paul, interesting question.
Yeah.
What percentage of a client's time do they spend working with all of their agencies? So just take a typical multinational working in a top 200 company.
Oh gosh, you've turned the tables on me, Simon. I don't know. I'm guessing it's probably quite a small amount because they've got quite a lot of other stuff on their mind. Maybe what, 20% or something?
We'll try between 5 and 7%.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So there is learning to be had there. The need to get things, as I said earlier, about brilliant basics, on brief, on budget, and on time, getting it right first time, hugely important.
Yeah.
I think we're also seeing a huge amount of clients restructuring their business. And this is almost, particularly in the large corporates, an ongoing process. And one of the things that we've learned is that if a client restructures their business, and I would say this to everybody looking at this video, the thing you need to think about is, do we need to be restructuring the way that we're set up to actually work with them? Because very, very often there is a client restructure and there is an agency review 6 months or a year down the line. But with all that restructuring, what we've seen, particularly over the last 7 to 10 years, is the stature of the chief marketing officer, the marketing director within client companies. That in tandem with the rise of the chief procurement officer, the chief technical officer, the chief customer officer, it goes on. But essentially the person that the agency traditionally has sold to is dropping down the food chain, and in most companies is outside of the C-suite. Now that's the problem for a marketing director. Paul's quiz question: average marketing director's tenure, Paul?
I knew what it used to be a few years ago, and it was sort of around about 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah, it's about 17 months now.
Yeah.
Put another way, if you're selling a campaign, you've probably only got one chance to actually get it right and help keep the marketing director in their job. And I think that's part of the reason why great ideas or big ideas are more difficult to actually sell. Because you have clients that frankly are worried about paying their mortgage and their job and career security. But with the declining stature of the chief marketing officer comes one of their key lieutenants, which is their agencies. And one of the biggest trends that we're seeing is that many more agencies are being considered as vendors rather than partners. And again, one of the bits of advice we would give is that very often when an agency is appointed, they proudly announce, "Hi client, we're your new partner." No, you're not. You need to earn the right for the client's gift, if you like, to actually call you a partner, and that takes time. The problem is, and this is largely due to attitudes and the huge scope of work, agencies are acting like vendors, or a bit like waiters and waitresses. The client says this, yeah, we'll come back to you and do it. If an agency is going to charge the fees it probably needs to charge, you need to be adding value in a more strategic way rather than just a vendor type of relationship. And again, a piece of advice we would give is that when entering a relationship with a new client, understand what their expectations of you are, understand what type of relationship they want, and adjust your service and business to actually suit that. We're also seeing, for all of these reasons, the average tenure of agencies is going down. If, Paul, you and I were having this conversation 20 years ago when we were in short trousers, the average tenure would have been about 7 years. 2016, it was about 3 years. Just pre-COVID, it was just over 2 years. We would estimate that post-COVID, the average tenure of a relationship is probably shorter than even that, and that's a real challenge. And I think one of the issues that we've spotted is that when we conduct surveys on behalf of agencies with clients, in many cases, not every case, but in many cases, the amount of people within a client company we're asked to survey appears to be going down. So the agency has fewer points of contact. And of course, if those points of contact leave, then the relationship becomes a lot more fragile, because other people will come in and maybe actually have their own agency. The things that don't help is that there is a huge turnover within the advertising and marketing agencies industry. I think the IPA quoted something like 33% agency turnover last year. Now, to be fair, that's down from just over 40% the previous year. But those are huge numbers. But equally, the turnover within client organisations is still pretty high. It's still about 25%. So people are changing on a constant basis. And we advise all of our clients to actually broaden their footprint within clients' organisations as much as they can. And that's something that we believe passionately in, is you can't build electronic relationships. You can build enduring relationships by using the shoe leather and going to see clients. And I really appreciate that at the moment, it's a lot more difficult. A lot of clients are still only working 3 days a week, but 3 days a week in the office. But prioritizing getting in front of clients with meaningful conversations, be it ongoing work or proactivity, is now more crucial than it's ever been before.
It's the old press the flesh and walk the corridors and see what you can, who you meet and who you can talk to.
Yeah,
I've
always believed this, that people give business to the people that want their business.
Yeah.
And just turning up and seeing them and being hungry for business is a differentiator. It always staggers me that it's almost a default these days to go straight to a Teams meeting.
No, I agree totally. Simon, it's obvious that you talk with a degree of authority and hugely knowledgeable about our industry and the sort of melee of stuff that is going on within it. And of course, you do this from a very operational point of view, insofar as you're in the middle of it with relationship audits and management. I mean, could you tell us a little bit about how your business works and the sort of interaction that you have between clients and agencies to be able to sort of garner all of this knowledge that you're kindly sharing with us at the moment?
Thank you. Yeah, sure. In a sense, we work in two ways. We work for agencies, and essentially our mission when working with agencies is to help you retain your business longer, for all the reasons we've just talked about, and to develop more business from those clients. When we started our business about 20 years ago, we estimated, and there was other published data, that it was 5 times easier to get more work from an existing client than it was from a new one.
Mm.
We and other people are now quoting figures between 20 and 30 times. Now,
Wow.
whether it's 21, 25, or even 15, it doesn't really matter. It's easier to get more business from existing clients. But there's always seemed to be a temptation from particularly agencies to actually grow the length of a client list rather than the depth of a client list. And essentially what we do is, be it through online studies or deep dive one-on-one interviews, establish the quality of the relationship the agency has, what's driving the relationship, crucially, how the client's business is changing, because every business is changing, and what are the opportunities for the agency to be ahead of the curve and working as a business partner with those clients. Now, we also work on the dark side. We work for clients direct.
Okay.
And essentially, we work for people like Sanofi, Pernod Ricard, L'Oreal, assessing the client and agency relationship, because the types of clients that work with us direct believe that they will get better work through a better relationship with their agencies. So those are 2 parts to the business. As I say, we collect what we call actionable insights, either through deep dive or through online, or in some cases we have some agencies who basically license our product, a methodology, and we train them to actually do it themselves. There are other parts of our business. We conduct what we call win-loss audits to understand often why you came second, because let's face it, if you are in a pitch and you don't get the business, you're always told you come second.
That's the worst one.
Yeah, exactly. And also, typically, many agencies are up against what we would call the usual suspects, competitors that come up on a regular basis. And what this constantly shows and gives us is intelligence into how your competitors are actually pitching. And then I think the sort of final part of a major part of our business is for mergers and acquisitions, and we check out vendors, client relationships before the acquisition actually takes place.
Okay.
But I think there's one other thing I would say, which kind of links back to what we said earlier, which is one of the pieces of intellectual property we've had for well over 15 years now is something that we call the Client Commitment Index. And this is based on the observation that even a satisfied client is capable of putting their business elsewhere. So years ago, we did a lot of research to actually find out if there is another level above client satisfaction. And there is. It's called client commitment. And so we've developed a robust and proven methodology to actually measure how relatively committed a client is, both at a corporate level and at an individual level, how satisfied they are. Nothing wrong with being satisfied, but there are still opportunities to grow. Whether they're apathetic, they're working with you because they have to, but if they had the choice, would they go elsewhere? Or whether they fall into the zone of what we call the zone of rejection. These are people that in the non-politically correct days we used to call terrorists, but we can't call them that these days, so we don't. But you kind of know what I mean. These are people that set tripwires for you that basically want a way out. And very often they can be junior people, but you would be amazed how much effect even bad-mouthing an agency by junior people can actually build up within a client organization. And what the Client Commitment Index does on a single slide, it shows you where each individual is and actually gives you a strategy for keeping the committed clients and taking individuals out of the zones you don't want them to be in to a much higher level.
Okay. And I know that you're obviously based here in the UK, but the offer is deliverable, isn't it, on an international basis?
Absolutely, absolutely. Probably about 50% of our work is delivered internationally. We have people on the ground in Australia, in India, in South Africa, in France, in Germany, the States, Brazil, Mexico. And the great thing about our team is they all come from an agency background. And we did look at other people in other offices, but what I would in other countries, but classically trained agency people can get to grips with probably almost any market and understand the quality of a relationship and what it needs to take to actually keep and build a quality relationship.
And do you, I mean, I asked this out of pure curiosity, given what I do, but do you notice any significant differences between geographies in the way that clients and agencies interact with each other, their expectations? I know that I'm sort of casting a huge net here and asking you to draw a line to infinity, but I mean, is there anything you could point out?
Well, I did say earlier about being politically correct, and I need to be careful here, of course. But I think the Chinese are more master servant, and there isn't a great interest in the types of service that we provide out there. If you took South America, for example, not in every case, but very often they either love you or they hate you, and there's nowhere in between. Germany tend to mark a lot harder. The Brits can be very fair. And you talked about geography. I'd also talk about job function, Paul.
Yeah.
Because if you have purchasing and procurement, they're never going to give you a 10 out of 10 or a 7 out of 7. That just doesn't happen. So there is a point that wraps around this it's not just about data. It's about the ability to interpret the data and taking into account particularly the point that you just mentioned. Are there differences? Well, yes there are, but you've actually got to interpret that. And I think one of the things that we've learned, even with our online study, our online product Relationship Radar, which I should have said is an award-winning piece of client feedback software, we always have some open-ended questions to allow people to tell you what they want to tell you, rather than actually what you necessarily want to ask.
Yeah.
And that's why some of our clients call this a client listening program.
Interesting. Very interesting. I can see that. And I'm just sitting here wondering though, Simon, I mean, if I'm an account director or I've got responsibility for a significant piece of business in an agency, are there any sort of early warning signs in your sort of experience that I might want to watch out for in terms of how that relationship with my client is going, good or bad? Because as I appreciate, I've done the account handling, and clients don't always tell you how they're feeling until it's a little too late. And to use the old agency adage, every agency is 3 phone calls from disaster. So it's important that those relationships obviously are looked after and nurtured. But is there anything we can sort of learn and to look out for?
There are quite a lot of things, and I think phone calls not being returned, work being turned down on a regular basis, a huge amount of reworks, poor communication, lack of, or rather, creative differences. When you speak with clients, just looking at their body language. One of the things I've always sworn by is being able to ask your question, what's keeping you awake at night?
Yeah.
because that not only gives you ideas in terms of proactivity, but it gives you ideas in terms of what's really driving the client's agenda. And also, I think it's the ability to actually talk to more than just your direct client. Have I got time to give you an example?
Yes, please do.
Whilst a lot of our work is marketing services, we also work in the professional services industry for large accountants and law firms. And a number of years ago, I was conducting a deep dive interview with somebody at a big financial organisation, and I was talking about the law firm. And this guy was the general counsel, the equivalent of the marketing director, very senior, and it was brilliant. It was fantastic. And then I went to speak to his number two, and all of that was good until she said, "But of course, we're going to have to look for another law firm." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And she said, "Well, our business is expanding at such a rate, I don't think they've got enough capacity." Now, what we were able to do was to go back and to immediately report that news back with a recommendation that they brought in another office. And it was, this was 5 or 6 years ago. That was £500,000 worth of income. Wow. that we either helped this firm win or save, but that wouldn't have come from just taking the soundings from the most senior person.
Interesting. It's building that entire picture. I can see and understand that. So slightly on a different tangent, if I may, Simon. I read an article fairly recently, and this is a completely different industry. So it was a medical study that was done in the States, and it was a group of two groups, and each group was asked to interact with either what they didn't know was either a human being or the other group had an AI, and they were asked to evaluate the interaction. And surprisingly, the AI came out on top in terms of obviously its knowledge, but also its empathy. And the patients, this was a blind test, and the patients didn't realize. I'm just wondering, do you think we'll get to a point where perhaps the account person is likely to be replaced by an AI because they're just more empathetic, able to listen, and then actually do the job better?
The reason I'm laughing is that we have an AI consultant who we absolutely swear by. And I spoke to her last week, and she said over the weekend she was talking to her therapist or something like that. And I only discovered that her therapist was AI. Anyway, in answer to your question, AI is going to have a profound impact. And you can see the major comms groups, the Omnicoms, the WPs, are investing quite rightly a massive amount of money, not just in the AI itself, but the training. And I personally subscribe to the view you're not going to lose your job to AI. You will lose your job to somebody that understands how to actually work with AI. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's just account people. I think that AI will redefine jobs in creative, in account management, and particularly in process.
Yeah.
Particularly in process. There are numerous surveys that I've read and seen that estimate that within 3 to 5 years, 30% of the headcount from most medium-sized and large agencies will go. Mm. And I think related to that, certainly our conversations with purchasing and procurement people, they're looking to get the most, they would say, get the most value. Some would say cut agency fees. And what they're saying is, well, what are you doing in terms of technology to actually drive greater efficiency? So I think every business needs to be looking at technology and what can it do to become more efficient. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago that we work in the professional services sector. And I think one of the things that a lot of, particularly law firms, do is they have what's called client advisory boards. So twice, sometimes 3 times a year, a group of people, let's call them general counsel, from non-competitive business, come into the firm for an afternoon, and the firm gives the client a short update on the agency, or sorry, on the firm rather, the kind of stuff you can talk about amongst friends. And then they talk about the key issues that are actually facing the firm and get the clients to suggest ways and methods of how the firm may be able to actually address that. And then as a thank you for those that want to stay, they take them out for dinner in the evening. Now, I think that's a great principle that more agencies can actually learn from. But where I'm going is particularly in the way of AI. I think agencies don't have to be an island out there by themselves wondering which way to swim. Engaging with the clients as a partner would is a really, really good way to be seen to be listening. And it's only a side benefit from these client advisory boards. But the client turnover from clients that participate in advisory boards is a lot less than those that don't.
Interesting.
That was a bit of a ramble. Does that help?
No, it helps a lot. It helps a lot, and I think there's a very useful, actionable piece of advice in there. If I'm honest with you, Simon, I'm conscious of the time. I could natter on with you for hours, as we have done in the past on many occasions. But if anybody wants to reach out and learn more about what you do, how you do it, and potentially, engage with you, either confidentially or otherwise, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, my mantra in life has always been there's no such thing as a wasted cup of coffee. So if anybody is interested in having a chat, whether you've got an issue or whether you want to talk about measuring your clients, or you just want some advice on an individual business relationship, please do give me a call. I think if I can ask Paul, you can put my telephone number at the end of this, but there's also the email and there's also the website. And I would love to hear from you.
Great. Well, Simon, as ever, it's a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And if anybody does want to get in contact with Simon, please do reach out. Thanks.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.